What's,
How do I shut this thing off? I forgot now.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon Chabados of Delmer, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
You know, Rabbi, we always like to have elected officials on the program, and we have one of the hardest working elected officials on our program today, the Albany County Comptroller, Michael Connors. So,
From your lips to God's ear.
okay,
Thank you
well,
very
welcome
much.
to the program.
It's a delight to be here with you and Rabbi.
Hopefully you take care of our money over here, here.
Well, we certainly can tell you where it's going.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, you've been a hawk on, very much so, it has been Medicaid expenses.
Yes.
How has that been? I mean, have you recouped the money that's of the fraud, waste, and abuse? And
No.
are we doing better at it?
No, we're not. I think that you have to go back to 1995 when then Governor dissembled the state employees who were doing the work on fraud, waste, and abuse. They outsourced it or privatized it, and that was supposed to save us a lot of money. The Comptroller is the chief fiscal officer in 8 counties in New York State. I'm one of them. And the other 54 counties is the treasurer. We aren't allowed to look at a Medicaid claim. So we can't audit a Medicaid bill at all.
Why not allowed to?
Because the state law doesn't allow it. So
Because of the privacy of the medicine?
no,
you
it's
mean,
not
or
the privacy. I
like
think it's the
HIPAA?
culture. It's the culture of it's again a culture of big government that enables people, which I think has been very destructive in the last 40 years, that we pay for services that are delivered. We won't pay for prevention usually. We'll just pay services over and over again. There have been numerous studies that have proven that anywhere from 3 to a high number of 10% of the claims are subject to either fraud, waste, or abuse.
Really, it's a lot.
And when you're looking at a $65 billion program statewide, it's a huge program. Then the program exploded with the ACA, the Obamacare Act, the Affordable Care Act that passed. So now you've had literally millions of people who are eligible for coverage have applied for the coverage, and you've had more of the business world start to reduce coverage, limit the hours, go to part-time work, eliminate
let
health
the
care.
county
Let
pick
the
it up.
counties and actually the taxpayers pick it up. You know, Rabbi, the way I like to look at this is that they say the dollar on Medicaid, 50 cents comes from the federal government, 25 cents comes from the state government, 25 cents comes from the county government.
Right.
The way I prefer to look at this is that 50 cents comes out of the rabbi's back pockets, 25% from the left front pocket, the other 25% from the right front pocket. So all this money from federal programs is just New York State money coming back. We have a deficit of trade with the federal government. We send $20 billion.
You're talking New York State.
New York State, $20 billion more that we send to them and it comes back. So 100% of this money on Medicaid spending is local taxpayers' money. So we're concerned about that. My real problem with Medicaid, though, is not just the fraud, waste, and abuse issue. When you look at the success of how we treat the poor, how healthy the poor are in New York State, on any kind of listing, we're in the low 42.
Well, why is it if we spend so
Well,
much money, how do you?
I think that there's not enough
anything?
accountability, Rabbi. I think that, people will do a better job on the work you inspect than they do on the work you expect. And there just isn't enough transparency into looking at how the payments go. We've got a huge problem with diseases that could be treated, that could really help us. When you think about all the related illnesses that come out of insulin-resistant disease, which 75% of us have the potential for that, you start adding up what we spend on things like diabetes, heart disease, asthma. There's lots of things we should be spending more money on prevention to get a healthier outcome.
Yeah.
What bothers me is, yes, we're 2.5 times more expensive than the state of California and Texas combined, but that our poor are not as healthy as the poor in other states.
Yeah.
I think that's a real crime.
And on a TV program over the weekend, I was watching, they said that Mount Sinai, I guess it was the hospital, said that they were not going to prescribe a certain medicine because it was too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And when they told that, when they ran it up the chain, flagpole and all that, and they told the pharmaceutical company that they're not going to be recommending this particular drug, the pharmaceutical company cut the price in half.
Do you have time for a story about this?
We got a half hour.
Robert, there's a doctor by the name of Adler who used to practice medicine here, and he worked as a researcher in pediatric cancer and pediatric diseases. Brilliant man. We brought him to county DSS, state DSS, State Department of Health, got nowhere. He's running this program now in Arizona. He called me up one day and said, I have a $2 medical device that could save your county $1 million in a year. So what are you talking about? He said, would you see me? I said, come, I'll come and get you now.
Yeah.
So he shows up in the office, and I said, what's this device? He takes out a cloth tape measure and drops the cloth tape measure. And he tells me a story about if you get people to lose 2 inches on their waist, what it can save the county. Enormous. It goes back to a study that he was part of, I want to say in Tennessee, but it might have been Florida. And it was a triple-blind test on fighting type 2 diabetes, adult diabetes onset, 40s and 50s. So the first group, Mark's group, gets placebo. Rabbi's group gets the real stuff, the drug that they're using, and then my group gets 20 minutes a day of exercise, and we have a nutritionist work with us on our diet. At the end of 3 years of the study, Mark's group, it shows a 12% improvement in the onset of type 2 diabetes, the psychosomatic effect that the placebo can usually bring about. The Rabbi's group delays the onset of type 2 diabetes by over 3 years. The price for both of those protocols, using the drug cost involved in that, was about $11,000 each. The third group that did the exercise 20 minutes a day and had a nutritionist, they delayed the onset of type 2 diabetes by 10 years at a cost of $3,500 each.
Right.
The pharmaceutical company that paid to sponsor the study squashed the study and never let the study be released because they didn't want people to know.
I just hope my placebo wasn't sugar pills.
You don't want sugar.
We don't,
Well,
because that would be...
Well, it's better than that than aspartame or some of the other additives.
There have been some medicines that you were very critical of in years past, because you've been at this for over a decade in terms of the Medicaid. Serostim?
Well, actually,
that was an AIDS wasting, or
the Serostin. One of the problems that happened with Serostin, and it started with, we did an audit by hand with help from the New York City Corporation Counsel's office. We couldn't get the health department to help us or our own DSS, right. So we got their grouping payments for this, and there's a lowest price you're supposed to get, annual wholesale price. That was one of the first drugs alphabetically that we tested, because we looked at 3,000 drugs. We did 150 of them. Started out, we did the first 10 drugs, and we were overcharged on every single one of them. We did 20 more, then we did 100, then we did 100. It wasn't until the 149th most expensive drug that we sold through the Medicaid in Albany County in 2004 that we find a drug that we were actually charged the average wholesale price that we're entitled to. So we looked at it 4 or 5 more, and we found that on $10.4 million of spending on Medicaid drugs that year, which was roughly 30% of what we spent, that we've been overcharged $2.7 million. So if you subtract $2.7 million from the 10.4, you're at 40% overcharge.
Right.
So we get the county to be involved in a lawsuit over that. And one of the pharmaceutical companies, we invited all of these companies, the top 40 pharmaceutical companies, to come to a meeting to discuss the results so they could argue with us. Not one came. That was just one of the drugs.
So that's one of the drugs. So what happened the intervening 10 years? I mean, are we still paying, are we still overpaying for these
Well, we believe
drugs?
that the lawsuit has ended that. But again, it's something we'll have to look at. That's why I've pushed for the last 3 years to try and get a piece of legislation passed. Right. And what I'd like to see happen in New York State, and you could help with this, that if the governor and the legislature were to pass legislation that gave county controllers or county treasurers the option to audit Medicaid spending, and I wouldn't ask for any money to set this up, I'd only want my share of the recovery, like the state gets,
Right.
that if they gave us the option to opt into it, those who wanted to do so, like us in Albany County, and had access to the expertise around to do an audit, could do so. Those who didn't want to, didn't have to. So it wouldn't be an unfair burden for other local governments. It would be something, an opportunity for us to look at this. And when you shine a light on some of these problems,
Sunlight's a great disinfectant.
It is, and you will find, because you're a member of the media, you know that. The New York Times series for 2 years had a tremendously salutary effect on the spending in Medicaid.
So
Put us back up.
So you're not planning another round of audits?
I'd like to. It's a matter of getting the information.
But you mentioned this goes back to '95 when the Pataki administration took over.
Well, that's when they started to outsource it.
Right.
And we got involved in 2002.
Right, but they also had OMIG, the Office of Medicaid Inspector General, who was supposedly working, this guy Sheehan, I guess, was supposedly...
Sheehan did a great job. Sheehan should have never been fired, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think Sheehan was a ferocious intellectual who understood the system and went after pharmaceutical companies and medical providers, and lobbyists made a very strong and compelling case to the governor as to why this guy was being unfair, helping the taxpayer, that he got fired.
So where...
His successor has been pilloried widely in the media, if you've read Jim Odato's stories or the stories in the New York Times.
Who's the current OMIG?
Jim Cox.
Jim Cox.
Yeah.
And so there's really no will to recover
I think
these
will
payments?
is exactly the problem. The culture there is that they're part of the system. I don't think the people at the bottom who do the work would love to see this happen. And
so now that there's a
leadership,
Democratic administration with the Cuomo administration, don't you curry favor, and don't you have a way of...
follow the money,
Yeah.
and I think you'll see what happens in the legislature. The problem we face is not enough people run for office, and we have a Congress and a legislature for sale. Everybody knows that, and it's unfortunate. I mean, let's face it, a member of the Assembly has got a very difficult time of doing anything unless the leadership accepts the idea.
That's right. That's right. That's the way it works. Rank and file members can speak out all they want, and then very little gets
Can't
done.
even get legislation voted on in either house.
But you did.
And I'm not saying the Republicans are any better. It's the same in the Assembly and the Assembly. I mean, it's the incumbocrats.
And you did testify before a Senate panel that was looking into...
2004, I believe.
So that's 10 years. And
Correct.
Did that report get filed on a shelf? I mean...
That's about it.
That's about it.
Yeah, the net result of everyone's concerns about Medicaid was a closure commission for closing beds for nursing homes, which resulted in us exporting 6,000 people who are medically frail and elderly in New York State to other states.
Like Massachusetts.
Well, Massachusetts got a huge number, yes.
Speaking of the nursing home, what's the latest with the Albany County nursing
There's
home?
a gentleman by the name of Larry Slatke who
Yes.
is currently running it. He's an outside professional, does a great job on this thing. The guy is very knowledgeable, loves the business, loves what he's doing. And as a result of that, we've seen an improvement there that has really been outstanding. The nursing home has done very well in comparison to previous years. And I think that one of the proofs, objective proofs that we can afford to run the nursing home is the state comptroller's fiscal stress monitoring of all local governments. And Albany County actually moved up a notch during 2013 while we had the nursing home. And since Mr. Slatke's been there, because of the work of the legislature, Mr. Slatke and the county executive being willing to let them go along a little while, there's been better results there.
So is it improving in terms
Yes.
of the deficit financially?
Yes,
I mean?
much better.
But
Tell
we
me
were told
how.
that there should be even a profit. There's potential for even a profit for Albany.
Well, and I think
pushing
that's
it too much?
hyperbole, I think.
Really?
I mean, the way I look at this, spending $5 or $6 million to support the nursing home does not bother me in a county government budget of $570 million. Because, Rabbi, we spent $38 million to subsidize the jail, and no one says a word about that. So, in my viewpoint, when you start to look at what the priorities are of government's obligation, I think the medically frail and elderly should be as highly valued as children, and it should be protected. I think when you send someone who's a loved one in their 70s or 80s to another county or to another state, it's unconscionable.
So
two bad things happen when we send people out of state or out of county. We still pay our 10% share of that bill.
Right.
And if they're out of state, there's a surcharge for out-of-state residents, and we pay that, our share of that surcharge.
So what are the numbers in terms of how
You're
it's
probably
improving?
looking at about $7 million, $7 to $8 million this year, maybe
That-
even a little less. That'll be the
that's-
subsidy.
that's
That's
the
down from 12,
Right.
down from 20 under Mr. Breslin.
Right, so now it's down to
Yeah, and it's a combination of now actually taking people into the nursing home. I mean, one of the examples that people don't realize is that we're licensed for 250 beds. Well, we didn't have actual physical beds to
Right.
put people in, so we were short 10, 12, 15 beds. So if you don't have the revenue, you still have the overhead and the expenditures, that's tough. Mr. Slatke is working with the county executive. They're doing over one of the wings. We're going to have some tremendous announcements at the nursing home over the next several months. So I'm very confident that this is an important project. It's an important service we should be involved with. And, I mean, who do we owe more to than the people that built this country?
Yeah, I wanted to take a tour of the county nursing home. and-
I'd love to take you out there.
Would you please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we'll make a date.
Yes.
Okay, because I wanted to see, like if there's improvements, because one of the explanations that someone gave me once was the fact that there was some frail and elderly who needed to be put in their own room, but the own room, they only had 2-bed rooms, and they needed to put one person where it took up an empty bed, basically, and they couldn't make the most of
The model
the
for
space.
nursing homes today is to go to a single occupancy room for a number of reasons. And we tried in 2006 or so to get the Eden Park Nursing Home done over on Holland Avenue.
Which is now a hotel.
Yeah, and by the way, the county executive at that time said, oh, it's a lousy location, it's not good enough, not a good building. Well,
Good enough for a hotel.
Marriott Suites thinks it's a good enough building, and so do the people staying there. So when you look at this, it's a function of your rating, what your occupancy is, the severity or the cost of services that you provided or categories of service, and the utilization rate. Albany County right now, because of a lack of some of the software and hardware that's needed, you could take an account or case that we provide services for where the utilization rate is 87.87. You can bring it up to 0.94, 95 without really spending an awful lot of money. And that increase, which I expect Mr. Slatke is going to be able to provide based on what he's done so far, I think you're going to see probably another $1.5 million in revenue come from there. When you fill the beds that you actually are licensed for, we've been down at 202, 208, 212 beds. When you start to fill the beds, the revenue comes here.
Absolutely.
When you avoid having people, transship to another state and bring back folks here, it's less expensive for New York State taxpayers, and it also provides the revenue to help Albany County Nursing Home. Our biggest single problem is that the New York State Department of Health allows other nursing homes to refuse to take people that are behavior problems or, like me, or people with severe mental challenges, people that need one-to-one care. And that's because of the cost. So Albany County is the home of last resort for that. We have the most challenging client mix of any of the nursing homes around here. If you look at what the average Medicaid billing is, as a percentage of the billing for a nursing home in Albany County, it might be in a low 70, 73, 74, 75%. For us, it's 96%. So we have a much more difficult problem to climb. I think that we're better served to provide these services for our residents here than we are to ship them to Framingham, Massachusetts, and then ask an 80-year-old woman to drive 140 miles one way to see her husband. I think that's unconscionable. I think you can run a first-class nursing home, limit what your costs are going to be, but you are going to lose. Government does lose money. Nobody ever talks about how much money we lose running a DPW in the 5 hill towns, or nobody talks about how much the road patrol costs or how much social services cost. For some reason, there's been an attack on the medically frail and elderly that, yes, these people are not entitled to these services. They're the problem for my taxes. They're not the problem for the taxes. One big problem you've had our current county executive said, well, we have to increase taxes every year to do this. Well, if you think about this, if the tax levy is $90 million, and the $90 million tax levy supports a nursing home where your surplus, excuse me, your deficit, you're providing care there to the tune of $7 or $8 million, why do you need to raise it 10% next year? You've already got it built into the base.
Right.
It's already in the budget. So when we had increased costs for our health insurance, and a huge increase in our costs for retirement coverage, that's not the fault of people who are in the nursing home. So let's be honest about it. That's not a problem with the nursing home. That's a problem with the state government and unfunded mandates they force on the counties.
Okay, so let me ask you this other question. Not that it shouldn't segue out of nursing homes, but how is your health?
Oh, knock on wood. Well, Rabbi, your prayers have helped. And by the way, everybody's prayers out there, I really appreciate. I've been very blessed. Knock on wood, everything is good.
So you had non-Hodgkin's?
Well, I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3. I had great surgery. If anybody has a neck problem, make sure you call Michael Daly. He's tremendous.
But I don't see a scar on you.
He did a good job.
Yeah, he did a good job. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people that wish he'd cut deeper into it. But he did a great job in the surgery, and he was wonderful and very quick.
And you go every
3 months.
Every 3 months to make sure that
everything's
the
good.
Levels are good. Okay.
And please God, it'll stay that way.
Now let me ask.
Anybody that's praying, keep it up. I need the prayers.
You're how old now?
65 in March. I'll be 66 this coming March, God willing.
Are you looking forward to running for re-election?
I'm looking forward to it, and please God, I'll be around to be able to do something next year.
But you're planning on...
Yeah, I'm planning on running, yes.
Okay, well that's good. Now, do you get along with this county executive as opposed to his predecessor, Mike Breslin?
I was a mentor for Dan, and I love Dan as a person. We get along well personally, I think. But county executives are loath to have anyone second guess what they do. You could take how close de Blasio and Scott Stringer were before.
Scott Stringer, yeah.
Stringer before the audit on the milk crisis or some other things. So my job is to do what is right and proper per the rules of the county, and that's not something always the county executive or county legislature is going to be happy with.
Right, but my question was, are you getting, in other words, you and Mike Breslin had some rough patches. Is it easier?
Well, Danny ran on building a new nursing home, and I endorsed and strongly supported Danny. And, he got sold a bill of goods by somebody on his transition team who happened to be from St. Peter's Healthcare Partnership, who has 6 nursing homes, saying we should be out of the nursing home business, and he bought it. So I made it very clear that I disagree with that opinion. Dan has got some great staff. I work with his staff, my staff, and regardless of where we are politically, we always provide whatever service they need. They need to borrow money for a short-term need, we take care of them.
So do you feel like you're, I don't mean on the edges, I'm talking about just generally speaking, do you feel more comfortable with this county executive as opposed to his predecessor?
Well, I don't really worry about it. So you'd have to ask him how he feels.
I will. He'll be on.
Good.
I just thought
ask him how he is. The way this operates is that our office is a service entity. We provide the services for them. We never hold back anything for anybody. And I call them as I see them.
Right.
And a lot of times, the county executive's not going to appreciate me calling him out on something that we don't think is proper for the county.
But you're happy with him? Overall.
Sure.
Yeah, overall you're happy with him.
Sure. I think Bishop Fulton Sheen was wonderful about this. Bishop Sheen said this 70 years ago. The good Lord commands us to love our neighbor.
Okay, let me ask you.
But he never said you had to like them.
No. You work.
I love my neighbor, but sometimes I don't agree with some of the things my neighbor does.
It's okay. We don't always agree with everything. So that's why I was just saying generally.
Yes.
I didn't mean
we have
to
a cordial
pick,
relationship.
I didn't mean to nitpick on certain specific.
No.
But you are a big supporter, advocate, I guess would be of wounded warriors.
Yes.
Could you please talk about that a little bit?
Well, there's a number of things. I mean, I was very lucky. I drew the number 300 in the lottery in 1969. So I didn't get drafted. I was lucky. We've got 3 million families that carry the load for this country to provide freedom for us and to protect all over the world. And we owe these families our support. I got involved with the Wounded Warrior Project a number of years ago when a guy that from Menands was blown out of his armored vehicle, and the next time he woke up was in Germany, and of course no clothes, nothing with him, not his pack, and he had a knapsack with him with phone cards, music, all kinds of personal goods and things he needed, and those were provided for him by the Wounded Warrior Project. I got involved working with them, and the North American Sons of the American Legion have raised probably $60,000
So
for that.
are are you actively doing whatever you can do? I don't want to necessarily say
Well,
fundraising. Wait a minute, in terms of the veterans' home when they're turning the Ann Lee home into the veterans' home.
I actually I brought
Show and tell.
I don't want to say the way it worked out is that Jack.
That's not
It
money.
was Steve Cuomo. Well, actually, I was going to, since you asked me about veterans, I thought I would plug the Veterans Memorial Breakfast in North Albany while you asked.
It might not happen. This may not be on the same.
Well, okay, well, you can cut. Well, there it is.
Every year, I'm sure.
Every year we have a memorial mass, and if
Okay.
Rabbi, if it's something you go to on November
So
2nd,
it's
we'd love to have you there.
All right.
Maybe you give us grace at the breakfast, but it's at North Albany American Legion Post.
All right.
And it honors the deceased veterans.
All right.
The thing
So
is,
if you can't go to that
if-
because the program might air after
Right.
November 2nd, you can always put a donation.
you can pay a donation, but I would talk to Soldier On. Look at Soldier On. They've
Yeah.
done a tremendous job. And Wounded Warrior Project, the local group we work with is Project Stride. They are operating in March. They have a ski program, snowboarding, sledding, and they bring 30, 40 families, wounded veterans from this area, from upstate New York, over to Jiminy Peak, and they bring them in for a whole weekend. So that's where we direct our money now.
I think that's where you and Dan McCoy are really on the same page because.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, we agree on probably 95% or 98% of the
Right.
issues that are out there. It's the transactions that you disagree on, you have to disagree, and you don't have to be disagreeable. But the Soldier On group wanted to take over the nursing home when Mike Breslin was trying to kill it, and Steve Cuomo contacted our office.
Steve Cuomo?
Steve Cuomo, no, C-O-M-O.
Oh, Como, like Perry
Yeah,
Como.
and Steve
okay.
is a very high-ranking guy at Soldier On. He brought Jack Downing over with him, and we introduced him to Mike Breslin. They didn't get very far. Dan listened, and they're working on that now. I think we're in the process of looking at a CEQA study for the property. We're having the property appraised, so for once we'll have a value of the property so we know what it is, and we can build that value into some kind of long-term lease, and hopefully bring a project over here. The real benefit of this Soldier On project is that housing for homeless veterans has always been, you've got a room and that's it. This project that Soldier On has is run like a co-op. So the people that are living there are owners of the building, and not their apartment, but their percentage. So if there's 20 people, they own 5% of it. If there's 50 people, they own 2%. But they own a share of the block, which is a much different. It's the only kind of veterans program right now in the country that provides housing for veterans, and does it. And I will tell you, I'm a pretty easy touch, and I draw people who are out panhandling around the streets. And I've had 3 occasions in the last month where guys I've talked to who are veterans, and they're down and out, and they're fighting addictions. I've called Jack Downing up, or one of his staff, within an hour and a half in one case, 2 hours in another case, and an hour in the third case. They had somebody there. These folks got a chance to actually have a place to live.
Yeah, actually, I know the couch is very fast. We only have a few minutes. But when you say wounded, there should be a footnote here. Someone you think, you see these horrible pictures of people without arms. I mean, obviously they're wounded. They're horrible. But there's like 50% of people coming, the soldiers come out of Iraq and Afghanistan are mentally.
Concussive brain injury. The concussive brain injury ratio is so enormously high. Rabbi, you mentioned a great point, and people have to realize you've got that, and you also have post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, so it's not only losing an arm, but it.
No.
And sometimes it's even worse. A guy without an arm knows how to, like you say, move forward.
And people are more willing and more helpful, but a guy that loses his sense of peace because of patrolling in Fallujah, goes for a weapon every time he sees something move quickly. It's very tough for a veteran, and we owe them. If our politicians are going to send them to all over the world to defend this nation, then if we can afford to send them over there to fight, we should be able to afford to take care of them when they come home.
Absolutely.
It's disgraceful the way we treat veterans,
And
in my opinion.
And we're running out of time. We're like a minute, but I want to leave it on a positive note or a friendly note or whatever to say that you're a member of the Albany Irish Rowing Club.
I'm lucky enough to be president of that.
President,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So, and what's this Irish Curragh? Curragh?
Curragh is a small boat that is a 2,000-year-old technology.
So you still row this?
Oh yeah, we raced. I was down in
65 years old, and
yes.
you're still doing this. Okay.
Yep.
Well, this is good. I got to come down to the river and see you.
And Rabbi will get you out. You've got to come down on the boat.
We'll make you a fisher. Row.
A fisher of men. We'll have you out as a fisher.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you very much for being here,
Mike, thanks for being on, and keep on with the good work, but do it with good health.
That's right. Absolutely.
Please God. Thank you very much, Rabbi.